Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen, depending from which part of the world you are joining us. Welcome to the first session of FNA's Supervisory Technology Broadcast. We are very happy that you are joining us today. My name is Adam Chabaj, and I will be your host during this series of Suptech Broadcasts. We will now give the audience a couple of more minutes to log in and join us. But in the meantime, we can very quickly go through some of the key housekeeping. Just like other FNA broadcasts, the Suptech broadcast follows a 60-minute format in which our guest speakers will provide expert insights into the latest developments and innovations influencing the industry today. You can, of course, use the Q&A widget below to ask questions, and together with our speakers, we will aim to answer as many of these questions as possible during the final 10 to 15-minute Q&A block at the end of the session. Please remember that the whole episode will take place under the Chatham House rule. With this being said, I think that we can now go through the agenda of today's session. During the first couple of minutes, I will quickly go through the introductions. Then we will move on to the discussion with our speakers. I'm really delighted that we are joined by two seasoned practitioners who are extremely well positioned to share with us some insights on the Suptech developments and Suptech trends. And then, as mentioned, we will dedicate the final 10 to 15 minutes to the Q&A. Moving now to the introductions. So FNA, as I'm sure many of you are aware, stands for Financial Network Analytics. And we are a deep technology company specializing in RegTech, Suptech, network analytics, and various types of simulations. There are 4 types of organizations that we work with. Central banks and financial authorities are the first one. Financial market infrastructures or payment and settlement systems are the second group of our clients and partners. The third group of our clients and partners are the global systemically important banks, the so-called GSIBs. And the fourth and the most recent group of our clients and partners are the organizations from the national security sector. On this slide, ladies and gentlemen, you can see the representative logos of some of the clients and partners that we are working with at the moment. Next slide, please. Suptech, as again, I'm sure many of you are aware, represents one of the core focus areas of FNA's collaborations with central banks and financial authorities. And our Suptech solutions allow analysts at these institutions to draw insights from massive amounts of both proprietary and alternative data, and to use these insights to both identify and tackle various types of financial as well as operational risks before these risks start materializing. On this slide, ladies and gentlemen, you can see some examples of the Suptech solutions that we currently have deployed at various central banks and financial authorities across both developed and emerging markets. Next slide, please. So I think that we can now move to the main focus of our session today, which is the discussion with our guest speakers. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm really delighted that we are joined by Joanne Horgan and Dr. Simone de Castri, who are really excellent experts and authorities in the context of the Suptech landscape. So Joanne is the Suptech Product Director at Regnology, and Joanne has helped to design and deliver regulatory solutions for some of the world's top financial regulators, working with more than 20 central banks and financial regulators worldwide. Dr. Simone de Castri is the co-head and co-founder of the Cambridge SupTech Lab. Simone is a frontier digital economy and financial market leader with 16 years of high impact engagements in the field of banking, payments, telecom, and technology. Joanne, Simone, good day to you both, and thank you very much for joining us at the Suptech broadcast today.
Great to be here. Thanks, Adam.
Hi, Adam. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Thank you very much. And now, with the introductions now being done, I think that we can start our discussion. Joanne, let us start with the big picture. I think it's fair to say that the current regulatory, supervisory, and market landscape for both central banks and financial authorities is highly complex and fast changing. Could you please tell us a little bit more about your individual work in this field?
Sure, yeah. So I have many years at this stage, I guess nearly 18 years experience in Suptech and working with different regulatory authorities. Working for Regnology, we really have a singular focus on regulatory reporting and data. And with the authorities that we've worked with over the last number of years, I've worked with the likes of Bank of England, APRA in Australia, the Monetary Authority of Singapore. We're seeing quite a lot of a focus at the moment on not looking at Suptech as a little innovation thing that's happening on the corner. It's becoming really a core now for regulatory authorities. It's almost a core requirement. And that is really just using technology to enable more efficiency in supervisory activities. And probably one of the key changes that we've seen is the amount of use cases that Suptech as a broad term is being targeted at. So I think that there are lots of interesting projects that we worked on over the last number of years. In particular, in the last couple of years, we've worked with the likes of the Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority, and working there on data collection platform that's looking at not only prudential and statistical information and looking more granular data, but also looking at the likes of their financial accountability regime, where they're looking at the fitness and propriety of senior managers, etc. Other interesting projects we've worked in Ghana, for example, with the Bank of Ghana on their sort of updated data collection platform. And again, they're looking at the use of APIs and very granular data, so collecting all of the loans, all of the deposits from the banks. So we do see a real trend with supervisory authorities working with more granular data and being more accepting now of using the benefits that technology can bring, I think, in making supervisory processes more efficient.
Great, very interesting. Thank you, Joanne. Simone, what is the focus of the Suptech work that you and your colleagues from Cambridge SupTech Lab are currently pursuing?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Adam, and hi, Joanne. It's a pleasure to be here today. So I've been working on supervisory technologies for probably the last 7 years, after a decade of focus on financial sector development, on regulatory and policy issues. And first with the RegTech for Regulator Accelerator, we did some demonstrations early in the days where the word Suptech was not even available. Working with the Philippines, with Mexico, Central Bank of the Philippines, the CNBV in Mexico, and prototyping some solutions that then those partners brought into full-scale deployments. And those were in the area on anti-money laundering, prudential supervision, the chatbot for consumer protection, and now other countries in Sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America are developing. So it was really a matter of somehow testing the hypothesis that there are financial authorities that are very interested in upgrading and upscaling their capacities through new methodologies and through new applications for the supervision of the financial sector. And back in December, I established with some colleagues the Cambridge SupTech Lab at the University of Cambridge, which is a new iteration of R2A, and we are somehow broadening our offering and deepening our foundations in supervisory technologies, leveraging the fact that we are at Cambridge. So we have a research work stream, and we are about to publish a report which is called the State of SupTech, which is based on a survey of 138, if I remember correctly, financial authorities. So it will really give us for the first time an idea of where the agencies are at in terms of their opportunities, implementations, challenges that they found in the SupTech world. Also in October, we are launching the first executive program. It's called innovation leadership program, and it's dedicated to supervisors and to their colleagues in the supervisory agencies who are really leading the digital transformation of financial supervision. And this is a 9-week online course. There are still a few spots available. So if anyone is interested, please reach out. We do develop software, as we used to do with R2A, collaborating with technology vendors. And we call this the Application Foundry. And currently we are about to launch 4 projects with 4 partnering central banks and superintendencies around the world to prototype and deploy new applications. We do technical assistance, and also we do it in a particular way. We are developing a public tool called Digital Suptech Diagnostic Tool, which will allow financial authorities to do part of the diagnostic work by themselves. And so creating maps of their data architectures, creating maps of technology stacks and business cases, and that somehow to disrupt a little bit the traditional classic TA provided by some of the multilateral organizations and consulting firms. And so really to accelerate the opportunities for the supervisory agencies. And finally, we're building really a community. This is what this is about. It's about empowering supervisor and data scientists and technologists and researchers and regulators working for supervisory agencies and creating a global community so that together we can leverage each other's resources to accelerate SupTech.
Okay, thank you, Simone. Simone, you have already alluded to this as part of your first response, but of course, SupTech is developing in response to various demand and supply drivers. In your opinion, what are the main factors shaping the SupTech landscape at the moment and why?
That's a big question. How many hours do I have to answer? So I mean, there are several that come to my mind. I would say there are some macro dynamics that need to be taken into account. And this is first the change in regulation post the 2008 financial crisis, which is requiring for more data reporting, which brought under the mandate of many of the supervisory agencies new issues such as consumer protection. Also, for some, particularly in the south of the world, the issue of financial inclusion, financial health have become prevalent. So there is an increased need to collect and make sense of data, and also a broadened mandate for financial authorities. And the growth in terms of their capabilities and their resources has not been proportional. They've not been able to hire data scientists, they've not been able to hire technologists or even supervisors in the numbers that are needed. There is the whole wave of digitization that we all live in our lives. And of course, financial institutions are changing their business models, they're changing the type of products. Embedded finance really changed completely the relationship between the supervisors and the regulated entities. So there is also the need to come to a paradigm shift in financial supervision that only, in my opinion, technology can really serve. Consumers produce new data and interact with institutions and with governments, agencies in a different way. And there is, of course, increased globalization and complexity of markets. So more of the need for cross-border collaboration between agencies, which means exchanging data.
Thank you very much.
The last point is probably the whole shift from compliance-based supervision to risk-based supervision that needs more of site supervision and data. So these are some of the factors that really make SupTech a must more than something that is a choice. So we see so much digital transformation by supervisory agencies.
Thank you very much, Simone. I completely agree with your points, and we are actually going to come back to some of these later in the discussion. Joanne, you and your colleagues from Regnology work with various central banks and financial authorities as trusted providers of Suptech technology. What are maybe some of the key trends and developments that you see from your perspective?
I think we see, we see regulators and financial institutions demanding more from the sector, from the Suptech sector, I think. And by that, I mean, we really see RegTech and Suptech as sort of two sides of the same coin. And I think the days of maybe considering that the burden of regulatory reporting is something that only the banks have to take is gone. So we really see regulators now taking a lot more interest in how they can really reduce this cost of compliance and the cost of reporting, etc. And for us, one of the key trends that we see, I mean, we saw years ago banks wanted to move away from, they have this spaghetti systems of data sources, loads of different silos of data, and they're now in a situation where they're potentially ending up with sort of the same situation again with like 25, 30 RegTech firms doing different bits for them, right? So I think there's a consolidation maybe in the the vendor space maybe that's needed, and some of that is collaboration and integration, making sure you've got APIs that are able to integrate really easily. But also I'd agree with Simone's point about the sector seems to have a lack of availability of experience and skilled resources. So whether that's within the financial authorities, in the banks, etc., it seems like there's quite a lot of demand there just for experience in RegTech and Suptech, and it's not always matched by what's available in the market. The other thing I'd just like to mention is the kind of democratization of technology. So I think, technologies that are just, cloud, AI, ML, low code, no code platforms, they're much more accessible than they were previously. And that's maybe one of the ways that you try to address this lack of skills or lack of resources that are needed. So, even a few years back, if you wanted to do any sort of AI ML, you needed maybe a PhD in something, or nowadays you can get on the market, you can get access to this technology much more easily. I think one of the limiting factors maybe is just some of the vendors in the space have a bit too much focus just on the technology, and maybe not matching that to the use cases that regulators need to be addressed. And that's one of the areas where we see with Regnology, for example, I mean, we've been working in this space on both sides, basically with banks and with regulators for over 20 years. And it's equally important to have a good understanding of the domain that we're in, of the challenges that that our customers face, as well as the technology. And I see that there's definitely been over the last number of years an increased recognition of Suptech as its own category. But I do see it, I don't want to say merging with RegTech, but I do see that there will be a lot more sharing of data. And one thing that we're looking at, one of the initiatives we're looking at is cloud, obviously. So we've got Regnology Cloud, which is launching at the moment. And that's that's quite important for both banks and supervisory authorities to be making use of that technology. But also another initiative we're looking at is having a shared view of the data. So at the moment we have banks on one side preparing data, trying to get it correct, and then throwing it over the fence to regulators. And we really see that there is an opportunity here to have a lot more shared technology and shared workflows between banks and supervisors. So building that community, as Simone mentioned, yes, it's important among supervisors, but also within a jurisdiction, making it a lot easier for supervisors and banks to communicate about the data that's being prepared and submitted. And that's probably a trend that we've seen. I think we'll probably speak about COVID a little bit, but that's something I think that COVID has kind of accelerated a little bit as well, that we can't be relying on manual processes, paper-based processes, and in-person processes. We have to have technology that's supporting data sharing, data quality checks, etc., in a much more automated way.
Great. Thank you very much, Joanne. And again, I completely agree. Maybe here I'll take a moment to go to some of our delegate questions because they have, I think, reacted very nicely to the points that you and Simone have made. And one area which seems to be of a particular interest to our delegates is maybe some examples of the platforms or frameworks or institutions which central bankers and financial authority representatives that are listening to us can use if they want to learn about Suptech trends, about Suptech developments, maybe want to get trained in Suptech. So maybe, Joanne, would you be able to share some examples of these platforms or organizations that can help the central banking community?
I think you've one of them here, which is the Cambridge SupTech Lab, and or two of them here in Regnology. You know, I think the training is important. I think the you know, just understanding what's out there is really important in terms of the skills that you're going to need. You know, I think the other thing that vendors like ourselves offer is managed services. So I think for us, it's you know, understanding Suptech is important so that you can obviously build a roadmap for what you're going to implement, etc. The skills, you know, what I would say on the skills is think about what skills you need internally and think about what skills you don't need internally, and maybe you should outsource some of those, because there is you know, there is quite a skills gap. So in terms of training, there is the Cambridge SupTech training that they have. You know, we would obviously have training on our own platforms and products, etc. I know that there is other training that a number of the membership groups, I know that you've worked with a few, Adam, that would do training for, you know, the likes of central banking, etc. And I think you know, another area that's quite interesting is the BIS innovation hubs and some of the projects they're looking at. So there is a lot of information out there. I think probably, you know, if you're looking for formal training, there is a route to go down. And I think sort of podcasts like these and events that people are running are important. Regnology actually has a RegTech convention event later in the year as well, where we'll have similar topics to discuss. And I think probably for people just getting into the space, that's probably what I'd suggest, is just familiarize yourself with what's available online on the websites, etc. And then if you're looking for more formal training, that's available as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Joanne. Simone, same or similar question for you. Maybe you could provide more details in relation to the training and generally educational activities that you provide in the context of the Cambridge SupTech Lab, maybe other activities and initiatives that are worth highlighting. And maybe this again relates to a delegate question, if there are any activities run by the BI's Innovation Hub network that you would like to highlight for our listeners.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah, I think in terms of academic programs, probably the Cambridge SupTech Lab Innovation Leadership Program is one of the first ones, if not the first one, really focusing on Suptech. And there is a component of data and technology, the analysis of how financial technologies are really creating this paradigm shift in financial supervision. And how to really design new products, how to design solutions. So human-centered design and experiences with agile prototyping. So it's a very experiential, pragmatical approach that mixed the evidence from academic research that we have done and from all the connections with vendors that we have, with the intention to actually build solutions. So not just to come up with knowledge per se, but knowledge to apply to the development of Suptech applications through the capstone projects. I mean, I think the offering of capacity building is increasing. We are also we have the intention in next year to launch a training for data scientists, specifically focusing on supervisory technologies, because we really see a lot of demand from financial authorities for this type of capabilities to be developed. We have not launched officially, so this is the first time we mention it, but it's online. It's on our website, a little bit hidden still. Something called the Suptech Marketplace. and it's a database of vendors and off-the-shelf solutions. And it's also a database of solutions developed by central banks internally. So the goal is really that nobody should reinvent the wheel, and we have limited resources to accelerate Suptech. So creating collaboration first starts from getting to know what each other is doing in this field and what is available. So through our website, it will be possible to find all these up-to-date informations about solutions that are tested and that are prototyped and they're deployed as full-scale Suptech applications.
Great. Thank you, Simone. Joanne, Simone, I'm sure that you will agree that one of the topics that we cannot unfortunately avoid when discussing the key Suptech trends and developments is the impact of COVID or COVID-related disruptions on the Suptech ecosystem. Joanne, I remember that last year your colleagues from Regnology published, I think, an excellent report focused on Suptech trends and developments in 2021. And one of the conclusions of that report was that one way or another, the Suptech landscape will be impacted by COVID-related disruptions, and that the central banking community needs to prepare for this. Now we are, of course, speaking 1 year later. It's the end of September 2022. Joanne, what do you think, in September 2022 has been the impact of the COVID-19 related disruptions of the Suptech landscape, and to what extent COVID has changed the direction of Suptech innovation?
I think it's accelerated it. I mean, I think what we're seeing, as I mentioned, Suptech, maybe, a couple of years ago when we were talking to central banks about it, it was the IT team, or it was, one supervision department, etc. Now it's at the, it's at the board level, if you like. I think it's something that's really, it's really come to the fore in terms of priorities for central banks. And I see that with, there's lots of reasons for that. It's not just COVID, I think, but COVID has definitely accelerated the recognition that you really need to be digitalizing a lot of the process. I think we saw, practical examples of this during COVID with some of our own customers, where, they needed to be able to launch and collect data really, really quickly, right? So, using Regnology Suptech solutions, they were able to put out data requests and get data back really, really quickly, because that's the type of agility that's needed now. And so I think one area that COVID has changed is probably the recognition that you have to be able to be agile. You have to be able to respond to changes very, very quickly in the market. The second thing is in terms of communication that I mentioned, and how supervisors interact with their banks. We have on-site inspections, right? And typically that was exactly what it sounded like, somebody going on site physically and doing inspections. A lot of that work had to be conducted remotely. And I think some of the processes and tools and workflows that have changed over the course of the sort of the lockdowns of COVID are there to stay now. So I think there's a lot more acceptance now of using technology as part of everyday workflows and processes in supervisors' lives. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, I think we're seeing now change in business processes as a result of COVID. That's probably the main thing I'd say, and it's here to stay.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. Simone, would you agree that it's fair to say that the COVID has created a bit of a new normal for Suptech innovation, and maybe are there any additional factors that you would like to highlight in that regard?
I don't want to say that, because I don't like to say the crisis, whether there are pandemics or financial crises, create a new normal. I think we should move ahead of this crisis and really lead in terms of innovation. But there is definitely important transformation that has happened in the last years, and Joanne highlighted some of these important situations that we see in the field. First of all, as we said, the non-availability of on-site examinations, and so the need really to make more robust off-site supervision, which is data-based and needs to be based on the data that are transferred and collected by the regulated entities. And so We see definitely a big advantage for those central banks who have already created systems of APIs to exchange data with the industry, compared to those who are still working with Excel files, mail, and portals, and all the lack of security. We have seen a spike in the use of chatbots. We worked with the Central Bank of the Philippines to launch Bob, their chatbot that was just ready before COVID. And so according to them, we, of course, we stay connected, and we know about their experience. Has been really fundamental for consumers to have that avenue to be able to connect and escalate complaints to the central banks. But also we see some important internal changes. One, I think, and it's very basic, but the IT upgrades. The fact that because of COVID, supervisors have better laptops because there was no choice for the IT teams, but to send their teams, their supervisors, better devices. And so this has been an important upgrade that now allows to crunch data in a faster and more reliable way. Also, the fact that there's been more attention to cybersecurity from the central bank's perspective, because everybody now is online. So we need to be careful about how we manage data, how we transfer data all online without relying on the on-site hardware that, and so also thinking about using clouds. And in general, from the point of view of the people working in these agencies, there has been more of a need to do more collaborative work. That's what I hear from many supervisors around the world, that all of a sudden they were online, they were getting to know each other more, they had more time to discuss. And so I think these are all things that are going to have a positive impact on the acceleration of SupTech. And we're going to have some results. So we asked some questions specifically about COVID in our survey, and there is part of the answers are coming through the State of SupTech report in October, and part through a major survey that the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance and the World Bank are going to publish in November. So we will have many more information on this topic coming soon.
Okay, so we'll definitely all look forward to reading that resource. Thank you very much, Simone, for the recommendation. Actually, before we move on with our discussion, I would like to briefly elaborate on one area that you have touched upon, because also we have a number of delegates asking about it, and that is, of course, how to make the SupTech innovation resilient against various types of risks, whether it's cyber risks or it's operational risks or it's risks against threat like potential cyber attacks. So this will be a question for both of you, drawing on your experiences. Are there any tips that you would highlight for our listeners for how to make SupTech innovation risk resilient? Maybe Joanne first.
I think it's not SupTech specific. I mean, I think any sort of technology, if you're going to rely on technology for anything and any core process, you have to make sure you've got the right risks mitigated. So whether that's security, you should be doing pen testing. Whether it's if you're looking at using AI, ML, there's a lot of discussion now about, supervised, non-supervised learning and who ultimately make decisions and how do you keep bias out of algorithms you're using, etc. So I think whatever technology solution you're using, you have to make sure that you are addressing whether it's an internally built application or a vendor that you're dealing with. Those answers have to be given, and you have to go with somebody. And I think that's one of the risks, I think, that maybe some startup regtechs and SupTech providers have raised, that they find it quite difficult to get into this space, because they're maybe coming with innovative technology, and then they come to a bank or a regulator and they're being asked questions that frankly a lot of startups don't think about. They're being asked about where is their latest pen test report, what kind of ISO certifications do they have, and I think what I'd say for regulators and anybody looking at SupTech, consider what is going to be if you like something you're just trialing and you're doing a POC one, and maybe it's not going to go into production, and maybe you can take more risks in that space in a sort of a sandbox environment, for example, versus what you're going to go into production with, which is when you really have to consider whether you have the right solution that has already mitigated those risks or has already sort of faced a lot of those issues in the past. So there's probably just and that's probably some of the challenges that we see with, you know, innovation generally, right? You can start with something quite small. Once you start thinking about how you're going to scale that up or how you're going to get that into production, there's a whole other level of due diligence really that has to happen on that solution.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne. Simone, same question for you. How to support resilient innovation?
I mean, there are so many possible risks. No, maybe just to complement what Joanne was saying, I think the major risk is that the applications are not fit for purpose, for example, and they're not flexible enough, and they are hard-coded. That's where we see many financial authorities being stuck. So I think the risk mitigation starts really early on with the design phase of the solutions, learning about human-centered design, learning about innovative design, and making sure that the procurement is designed to attract cutting-edge vendors, to attract those that are big enough to serve a public agency, but not too big that they don't care anymore about innovating, and you know, they're just selling and reproducing the same product over and over and over again without really understanding the context, understanding how the agency is working. In the procurement process, there are risks that are embedded in the sense of lack of iteration. So many agencies just issue, you know, $2 million contracts for 2 years, and they don't see the vendor until the solution has been developed. But then not always the business case has been understood, and not only always the tech specifications are matching the business case. So I think it's really a matter of bringing a new mindset of how we do innovation. How do we create together vendors, supervisors, external experts, and how do we do agile prototyping? And like something that we mentioned before, but that's where many of the risks are mitigated. It's in the phase of development. Another risk is to end up with very expensive maintenance contracts that are unsustainable for the public agencies. And again, that's something that can be mitigated in the design phase, being very clear with the vendors and becoming part of that team that is developing the solution. For example, when we built the API system in the Philippines, it was with CRT, a Croatian technology vendor, and they did an amazing job. They went above and beyond what was the request, because we really connected every week with the team of the central bank and the vendors discussing together. And also at the end, the central bank of the Philippines was able to own the solutions without the maintenance contracts, because we gave them, together with CRT, the right training to be able to continue to develop the solution by themselves. So these are all things that need to be thought ahead of the development of the solution. And then, of course, there are the cyber risks. There are the risks of governance of the data, or let's just repeat it because it's necessary. Don't collect data that you don't need. Don't collect data that you don't analyze. Hash the data after you have used them. Don't just get with a pile of data that are a liability for you as a public agency.
Thank you very much, Simone. One other area that I would like to touch upon as part of our discussion, also being aware of the time that we have left, is the strategic approaches to innovation within the central banks. And I think what we can now observe is that a growing number of both central banks and financial authorities are onboarding on institution-wide Suptech programs that should enable them to coordinate the efforts of the relevant departments, but also form the basis for end-to-end Suptech solutions covering pretty much the entire supervisory cycle, from the data collection through to the data analytics, through to the communication of the results. Based on your experiences, Joanne and Simone, do you have any tips for how central banks can balance the tactical and the strategic priorities, meaning gaining some low-hanging fruit successes in the short run, whilst properly focusing on the medium and long-term goals?
Yeah.
Maybe Simone.
Yes, Mona, you go first.
Oh, okay.
So yes, my recommendation, I mean, for example, I worked with the New York State Department of Financial Services doing their roadmap for digital transformation, and with some other agencies. And my recommendation is always to find some projects that can be started right away, that start to demonstrate the potential of technology, that start to educate people to break in some data silos and to collaborate more. But then beside the one or two short-term projects that are those low-hanging fruit, there is really the importance of carrying on the work for the more long-term modernization, for the major transformation initiatives. And in my opinion, it's a priority to hire CTOs, so chief technology officer, to find a good chief data officer to really build the ground for these innovation initiatives. So creating data taxonomies, creating data governance, mapping out the existing processes, the existing applications, and understanding what capabilities need to be developed, because in many cases, as we see before, in parallel with, it's not enough just to develop a Suptech application or to buy a software. You need to have the data scientists. You need to have the business analysts to understand better your processes, mapping out and understanding what are the priorities in terms of digitization of some processes. You need to have clarity around where there is the need to digitize an existing process, or where it's better to reinvent what we call a Suptech first approach, to really rethink the way you are supervising a product or a subsector, really creating a digital supervisory methodologies and tools that help you and support you through the process.
Great. Thank you, Simone. Joanne?
Yeah, I mean, I think the, I think that it's really important that when a supervisor is looking at Suptech, they're not just looking at the technology. Like that's really important. So yes, it is important to have, as we mentioned, the right type of vendors or in-house skills if you're going to build something, integration between those. But I think one agency, for example, that we're working, the Bank of Lithuania, they've taken a really good approach. They're looking at all of the different work streams that are important. They're looking at governance of data. They're looking at how they will. So when they're looking at this, the whole project of modernization, as Simone mentioned, there's lots of work streams you have to look at, and lots of areas of that program of work. So I would say, in terms of balancing tactical solutions versus a larger program of work, just make sure that the outcome you want to achieve is clear. So I think one thing that we've seen quite a bit, and we refer to that when we see RFPs, for example, they think about putting in the technology, and the RFP is often going out looking at a technology solution, and not enough considerations given to the skill building that needs to happen, or the how you're going to build up a longer term roadmap. The other thing I would say, try and go live quickly with something. So that is important. So even if you're doing a strategic longer term program of work, do it in phases. Be a little bit agile. Make sure that you're iterating. Make sure that you're getting the outcome you expect. So going away and spending 2 years building a solution isn't the way things work anymore. I think you really need to get live with something, see the impact, and be willing to reprioritize. So we're working with agencies where we're looking across insurance and banking and the funds industry and different use cases. And it's really important that whatever technology you're working with or vendor you're working with is flexible, and also that you have the capability to self-serve. That's one of the key things that we see with regulators. You need to be able to have a solution that you're going to be able to maintain, and that you're going to be able to add to over time, whether that's new data collections or be able to integrate with new systems as you bring them online.
Okay, thank you very much, Joanna. Maybe elaborating very briefly on what you just mentioned, we have a number of participants sort of asking both you and Simone to sort of compare the top-down versus bottom-up approach. Probably it's not that simple, and it has to be like well-functioning Suptech strategy. Need to be really focus on a case-by-case basis and really combine these two strategies depending on what is really needed.
Yes, but I would say top-down. Where it works, where you have the buy-in from the top down. So I do think that is important. So bottom up, if we're talking about bottom up, where you're just looking at more granular requirements or sort of individual departments with needs, that I think it works better where you have, as I said, that kind of board level buy-in for a Suptech strategy. I think you obviously need to look at, when you're looking at requirements, etc. You're going to do both. You're going to look at bottom up and top down. But for me, I think any supervisory agency that's looking to engage on a Suptech or digital transformation program really needs that buy-in from the top, because it's going to require investment, time, etc.
Correct.
And I think here we touch on a very sensitive point, which is the problem is the distance within the top and the down in public agencies in the public sector. Agencies are incredibly vertical, very hierarchical, and what I've learned through my work is that in many cases, so always the endorsement and the buy-in from the governor, from the superintendent, from the head of the institution, it's absolutely needed. Presentations to the board needs to understand. The board is really needs to understand what does it mean to do innovation. And to do innovation, you need to understand what the people in the ranks are doing. What there are data analysts who are doing so much manual work, really cutting and pasting data from a PDF into an Excel file, from an Excel file, from an email into other Excel files. And this creates duplications, mistakes, it creates risks. And the problem is that this work most of the time is not visible to department managers, not to talk to the executives. So this needs to change. There is a mindset of collaboration, and for really the top of the public agencies to understand better what is happening, what is the experience of examinators. When people are going on site and they cannot rely on accessing their databases because you're not allowed for using clouds. So you're creating delays. Like some policies, I think, are still very legacy, and they haven't kept the pace with the needs of supervision. And so more dialogue within the institutions, it's absolutely important to understand what supervisors need, what data analysts needs to be able to do their job. And then, of course, any project needs to be endorsed and needs to be sponsored by the top of the institutions.
Yeah, and just one other final point on that. I think, what we see as different between the public sector and private sector, a supervisory agency shouldn't be afraid to actually, measure what this innovation is doing. So innovation without impact is nothing. So you have to be able to articulate that to vendors, to reporting up, for example. And I think that's something we see that's quite lacking. So, if there is, as Simone said, if there's a job that's taking 2 weeks of manual effort every time, then put that down as a requirement. Say, we want this process to go from 2 weeks to 2 days or 1 day, or, whatever it might be able to do. And that's something we typically see a lot of requirements which are about the solution must do X or the solution must do Y, but actually really think about the impact that you want to have, whether that's efficiency or whether that's, we want to be able to identify risks faster. We want to be able to collect data much faster. Try and put some metrics around it, and I think that will help with some of the buy-in maybe that you need from the top of the organization.
That's a very good point, Joanne. Absolutely, like having KPIs, having clear objectives that are measurable, and monitoring progress. So, if 1 year you have done 50 examinations, well, next year maybe you should set your objective to 70. And how do you get to 70? How do you get strategic in that sense? What type of training you offer? But Unfortunately, also, I think that many people who don't work within the agencies are not acquainted enough with the complexity of public agencies, in the sense of the limitations that there are in terms of talent, finding data scientists, hiring new people. No, in the private sector, you need 100 data scientists. If you have the budget, you just do it. If you are in a public agency, you are working with the public budget, you're working with public recruitment and hiring rules. In many cases, you're confronting resistances from the unions to change titles, to change the focus of the workforce, even to give training. Sometimes it's a big negotiation. So we need to bring a little bit more flexibility to really be able to tackle the challenges of the modern financial sectors, at the cost otherwise of becoming irrelevant, or at the cost of having the next financial crisis. The 2008 crisis costed each American $70,000, each single person living in the United States, 70,000. So the cost of a financial crisis is massive and is no longer limited to one country because the markets are global. So altogether, we really need to rethink a little bit about how public agencies can go into a phase of modernization, which Suptech is one piece, and I think is an important Troy horse. It's an opportunity, it's creating the opportunity for this dialogue and to look at the issues that there are in HR departments, with procurement, in all the type of horizontals that needs to support the verticals of supervision.
Those are excellent points. Thank you very much, Simone and Joanna. We have approximately 7 minutes left, so I think there is time for maybe one more question. A number of participants are very keen to hear your views about what is the future of Suptech, especially in the context of all of the developments that are here. Of course, Suptech is a very, very dynamic landscape, and it's always useful to hear some tips for how to filter the most relevant ones. So maybe, Joanna, you can go first. What are the key trends and developments that are worth following over the course of the coming months, I would say 12 to 18 months, and what will Suptech look like in the future?
I mean, I think what we hope it'll look like and what we're trying to shape is, you know, it'll look like the equivalent of one of my colleagues used the Tesla example, you know, so Tesla, when they want to roll out an update, you know which colleague that is, Adam, you know, they want to roll out an update, for example, it goes over the air and all of the cars are updated. Well, why can't regulatory reporting requirements be the same, right? So something similar where we're really using the technology that's available to not, you know, to reduce duplication. So we see so much duplication of effort, so much duplication of technology. And that's what I mentioned about RegTech and SupTech being really sort of two sides of the same coin. I think, you know, what you need for that, you know, what we need for that is, I think we have the technology today. We have, you know, cloud, we've got open APIs. One of the key things that we need is more standardization of data models and more standardization of how data is described. And that's a really, you know, that's a really important factor. We've seen it in other areas, in the tax area, for example, where the OECD standardized the common reporting standard, and we have, you know, 100 countries worldwide can share data in the same format. So I think there does need to be more of a drive for data standardization. First of all, that will enable this, and then as we've mentioned, you know, looking at how we can use the technology that's available. I don't think we're lacking technology. I think it's really about governance. It's about how we handle those risks, as we mentioned, the data sharing, the data security, etc. But that's, you know, that's what we'd like to see in the future. I think where we have, you know, we have technology that can be shared. We've got, you know, code that's openly shared by regulators, and data that ultimately can be shared much more easily in future.
Great, thank you very much, Joanne. Simone, a similar question for you. What will Suptech innovation look like over the course of the future? And maybe is there any area which is not covered by Suptech at the moment, but should be over the course of the next 12 to 18 months?
So I think we will start to see some solutions to be replicated across the world. We see that already with the chatbot. The first was the Philippines, now Rwanda, Ghana, a number of other countries. I think the next step will be to be able to get into the data and to analyze data across border, creating benchmarks, understanding better the customer experience through the data that are gathered through complaints. The other tendency that I think we will see is we're going to start using more triangulation between supply side data, demand side data, open source data. So less siloed thinking, less prudential supervision happening only with the reportings that are coming from the regulated institutions, or consumer protection happening only with consumer data. I mean, one trend that we absolutely need to see, that's the most urgent probably, is the plumbing, and it's about APIs. We need to develop more APIs between central banks and regulated entities to exchange data faster, with more granularity, and in a much safer, protected, secured way. I really hope that there will be more evolution on anti-money laundering. I mean, the whole anti-money laundering supervision needs to be rethought and rebuilt. It's what exists right now is not working at all. So it's expensive, and it's not effective. It's not impactful. So I really hope that Suptech will really help to rethink completely anti-money laundering supervision. And there are new areas, for example, on ESGs. I believe if we start thinking about data and Suptech, we can really make some advancements in keeping the market, the economy accountable for how the resources are utilized toward the common objective of more sustainability and reversing climate change. So otherwise, yeah, I think Joanna really nailed it when it's going to be about the data. It's going to be about data governance, and it's going to be about how we are able to really create a more global and more effective community in addressing some of the issues around the data governance and data security.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Simone and Joanne, again for your final responses. I'm now looking at my watch, and we are pretty much at the end of the session. So, Joanne, Simone, I would like to take the opportunity to thank you again for joining us at today's inaugural FNA Suptech broadcast. You have provided us with some extremely interesting, extremely timely, and extremely relevant insights. So thank you very much again for joining us, and we'll, of course, all very much look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Also, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention and active contributions. You have provided us with loads of questions and comments, which was great and made the discussion quite interactive. So thank you very much for your active participation today. Before we conclude, I would just like to remind you that in case you would like to learn more about the activities of the Cambridge SupTech Lab, Regnology, or FNA, you can, of course, get in touch with us either through our websites, social media channels, or directly through email. We will all be delighted to continue the discussion. And also, I would like to draw your attention to the upcoming FNA broadcasts. Tomorrow, we will have another episode of our CBDC broadcasts, which will be featuring two, again, excellent speakers, John Belisarius from Accenture and Raul Herborg from GNT. And in pretty much exactly 1 month, we will be having another episode of our Suptech broadcast with already confirmed participation from Pertu Korhonen from the Qatar Financial Center Regulatory Authority and Clara Machado from the Central Bank of Colombia. And we'll be discussing another very timely topic that we already touched upon today, which is the data needs and requirements created by Suptech Innovation, with a special focus on the combining of the proprietary and the alternative data. So I am myself and very much looking forward to this discussion. With this being said, the final pleasant obligation that I have is to thank you again for your attention. I hope you all have very good days, and we very much look forward to keeping in touch. Bye-bye. All the best.